Thank you for joining us. This is a live podcast filmed in New Orleans in our studio at Hex Old World Witchery. And we are a podcast about British traditional witchcraft. We three are Alexandrian High Priesthood. I'm Ellie Barnes. This is Brian Kane and Levi Rowland. We all run covens, Alexandrian covens in New Orleans. We are on Season 6, Episode 8. And this is our final show for now, not for the season, but we all take a pretty long break in October, November, because it's some of our busiest months of the year. We are doing a call-in interview program this season and last season where we select an incredibly beautiful, intelligent, and successful fellow witch to come up with ambush questions. We do not know the subject matter. Today we have High Priestess Christine Stevens. She started the New Orleans Coven with Brian and Carrie Ewers years ago, studied with us under Val, went to England, Portugal, and Greece with us 11 years ago. Christine is very successful, corporate, millionaire, beautiful woman. I know, I've seen her in her underpants. She's really got it going on all the way. And she is our ambush interviewer today. Please watch us on YouTube and subscribe to the Hex Education channel and give us a like, a thumbs up. Watch us on Facebook and we can see your comments. We can read all the comments. Levi reads them, and we often answer questions from the comments. But we are a call-in show, a live call-in show. So at the end of the interview questions, we open up the phone 309-463-3377. And beautiful Christine will be part of the panel, so she'll be able to answer your questions along with we three when you call in. So welcome to Covendom. We're excited about a fabulous day today. We're having the news from Levi? Brian. The news from Brian and the occult demonstration from Levi. Okay?
Perfect. Hello. So for the news this week, first of all, happy equinox to everyone. Mm-hmm. It's the first day of fall. And I feel like the autumn equinox is the beginning of our path into spooky season, meaning that Halloween is right around the corner. And for me, that means we're getting very busy, like Ellie said. Part of the reason why we take a break during October is because the staff is too busy to help us. So, and Kaylin will go insane and kill us all in our sleep. So we take a break in October usually, and I get very busy towards the end of October as well. And then Levi's actually going to Rome, so we'll be resuming our episodes in probably December, right? Which is normal. We take a break in between. So first thing I want to say is if you are anywhere near Salem during the month of October, we have the Witches' Ball, which is on October 25th. I think that's on a Saturday. It might be a Friday. And if you are going to be in the area, buy tickets to the Witches' Ball. You'll be able to see me and Christian there, and the Dragon Ritual Drummers, and the Witches of Salem. It's a great event. The Festival of the Dead is all month long, where you can go to the psychic fair, you can visit all the shops, you get to see lots of famous witches rolling around, and everyone's in their best attire. It's lots of fun. And if you are there Halloween night, we have a circle on the Commons that we will be hosting with Lorelei, and we're going to have a surprise. So it's going to be an iconic witches circle, and that's all I can say. So that was my first bit of the news. My next bit of the news is actually, interestingly enough, and I don't know if this is like always true, but it's true this year. So in this day in history, I got to pull up my thing here. 330 years ago, September 22nd, 1692, were the last hangings in Salem, Massachusetts. So the last 8 victims were hung on this day in history. So I don't know if that's always the 22nd, because I've never heard this before. But today it happens to be the fall equinox that the last 8 witches were, accused witches were executed. And I wanted to read off their names really quick, just sort of as an honoring. Now, keep in mind, most people don't really think these were witches, and I don't think they were witches either. Maybe some of them practiced folk magic, who knows? And who knows, maybe they were witches. But the point is that it's in the name of witchcraft, so I think we still owe them an honoring to being victims, which will segue into something else. So it was Mary Esty, Anne Pubitor, I'm not sure if I'm saying that one right, Margaret Scott, Mary Parker, Samuel Warchell, Alice Parker, Wilmot, Red, and Martha Corey, which is the name I remember the most. They weren't the more famous ones, but they were the last ones that were all hung on the fall equinox, apparently. So, just a moment to honor that, that we had that peace in our country too. And what most people don't realize, there were actually executions in places like Connecticut and things like that. They just weren't as famous. So I wanted to segue into the last part, because when we're talking about persecutions and we're talking about like the spirit of human beings persecuting people, it's the Wild Hunt just did an article. A lot of people have been talking about I'm going to say the Republican Party, even though Trump started this, I'm going to say the Republican Party putting out the rumors that people are eating cats and dogs in Ohio. It's Ohio, right?
Yeah.
And they're really targeting this towards the Haitian community. And this parallels to events about witchcraft in the past, because they're demonizing these people. And a lot of these people are practitioners of voodoo. So that has implications even for witchcraft, because the general public doesn't really separate the two of us. As much as we try to educate, they see it all as witchcraft. So it's a stone's throw away to somebody practicing European witchcraft being also accused of eating cats and dogs, which I believe sounds familiar in the witch trial. So it's another form of the satanic panic, as Levi said, and it has dangerous implications. There are no Haitians eating cats and dogs in Ohio.
No.
It's just not happening.
Not a one.
Why they conjured this up, I can't fathom for the life of me, but they continue to propagate it. And there are people who are actually like believing this. So I know a lot of you are making fun of it with your memes and stuff. It's hilarious. But I think you should realize how easy it is for someone in the government or someone in leadership to really shift the consciousness of their followers through blatant lies and accusations. So I think as we honor the last 8 victims of the witch hunt in America, we should keep in mind that those witch hunts still continue today in various forms. And we need to be diligent. Anyway, off to Levi.
Absolutely. That was a powerful message.
Thank you, Brian.
I also see all of your lovely comments. Good evening to everyone. They are coming through very clearly. Today I wanted to do a quick, this won't take too long, but a lot of people who watch this show or who are interested in magic or the occult really also want to get interested in Kabbalah. And so I thought I would use that as a jump board for today. And I just brought 3 books from the shop, actually. Like I didn't even plan which books. I was like, I'm going to get them when I get there, and that'll guide my thinking. And one of the things I want to start with is, if you're somebody who really wants to get interested in Kabbalah, something that I think is really important to know from the get-go is that the tradition of Kabbalah is Jewish, right? That is where it comes from. And then it developed later into what came to be called Hermetic Kabbalah or Christian Kabbalah. That latter development of Christian or Hermetic Kabbalah is the Kabbalah used by most people who practice witchcraft or magic or any kind of modern esoteric
Wouldn't you
practice.
agree, Levi, that that's also the fusion of Neoplatonism when that was happening?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Absolutely. It all blends. There's tons of influences from other philosophies. But a lot of people get confused when they get into Kabbalah and they're reading a Hermetic Kabbalah book and they're like, oh, this is what Jewish mysticism really is. And then it has absolutely no connection to Jewish mysticism.
Right, couldn't be further from the truth.
Couldn't be further from it. So if you're interested in the Jewish side of Kabbalah, this is a book I knew we'd have one. This is the Bachir, the Book of Illumination. This is the one that is translated and commented by Aryeh Kaplan, who's a Jewish scholar. And he also did a wonderful translation of the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation. But a lot of people who investigate Kabbalah do not understand that there are different schools of Kabbalah even within Judaism. And one of the most common ones is called Lurianic Kabbalah, after Rabbi Luria. And it uses a different formulation of the tree. It has very different philosophical implications than other forms of Kabbalah. And Hermetic Kabbalah doesn't really pull from that. It pulls from different sources. It started with people like Athanasius Kirchner, who was a Jesuit priest. It's brought through all of the Hermetic revival that the people like Marsilio Ficino were doing. But it's really important to recognize that they Christianized it. And so if you go and pick up a book like the Bachir...
It's very Christian.
Yes, it's very Christian. But if you pick up the Bachir, it's very Jewish, right? It's going to be nothing but references to the Torah, nothing but references to the Hebrew language. And then if you pick up something like, this is a classic, The Ladder of Lights, right? This is from William G. Gray, who started did he start, or was just a major part, Ellie, of the Sangreal?
So it was his creation.
He created
Sangreal
okay.
Fellowship, yes.
This, if you pick up something like this, or something like Crowley's works on the Kabbalah, you are picking up a work of Hermetic Kabbalah, right? It is not it is not continuous with the Jewish mystical tradition. It is its own thing. Do they have overlap? Yes, and you can see that overlap in simplified explanatory texts like this very popular one, the Chicken Kabbalah, right, by Lon Milo Duquette, which is rooted in Hermetic Kabbalah very much, but also tries to bring in a lot more of the Jewish sources around language, because Kabbalah is, in many ways, a very, very complex sort of mystical philosophical system that is inseparable from the Hebrew language and the Hebrew scriptures.
The rabbis and the young men who actually go to Kabbalah school, it's completely in depth with a completely different periphery of what they're studying. It's really studying philosophy, religious philosophy for them. Whereas with us, it's, in my mind, you know, and I'm certainly not an expert Kabbalist, but I think of it as repackaged Neoplatonism from our perspective.
I was actually going to say, I think that Hermetic Kabbalah is really a sort of formalized Neoplatonic Hermetic philosophy. Does it draw from some Jewish mysticism? Absolutely, but it's not continuous.
Because they were veiling it in Christianity.
Yeah, they were making it Christian.
I think that's why they repackaged it. Because if you go to the Golden Dawn and study their idea of the tree, they reference Christ in it.
Oh yeah,
right.
Christ is in Tiferet.
Yeah,
Christ is in Tiferet. But to end on, I didn't have a copy of his book, but I also love the works of Gershom Scholem, who's considered sort of like the de rigueur academic around Kabbalah in the English-speaking world. But he wrote a book called Alchemy in Kabbalah, where he takes Crowley pretty harshly to task. And if you really want, and it's a very slender book, you can read it in a setting, but if you really want to get a grasp of what the difference is between traditional Jewish Kabbalah and Hermetic Kabbalah, that's the book I would recommend. Forewarning, it's harsh. You know, it has a low opinion of Hermetic Kabbalah. That doesn't mean that I think Hermetic Kabbalah is bad. I just think that it's important, if you want to get interested, to sort of investigate both. And that is my
Is it true, Levi? I always learned that to study Jewish Kabbalah, you needed to be a male, at least 40 years old or older. You were going to go into a specific system of training.
In some
in Orthodox Judaism, they have children, but you do have to be male.
And it depends on the community.
You should have to speak Hebrew, right? You have to know Hebrew to study Jewish Kabbalah, right?
That's where when I started researching Kabbalah, that was a really good book for me, the Chicken Kabbalah, and that's when I realized I would never really be a Kabbalist. Because I'm not going to learn Hebrew.
To kind of go off your question, and then I'll bring Christine on.
A Kabbalist.
It's very a lot of people don't realize that Kabbalah had its own phases of popularity and anger in the Jewish community. There are a lot of Jewish philosophers who despise the Kabbalah
today, right?
Because they think it's sort of hokey, mystical nonsense. And there are just as many Jewish philosophers who love it and who think it's a beautiful sort of explanation of the divine. So.
Devil Brian, I saw you on there. We haven't seen Devil Brian.
I know, I saw him too. So I'm going to bring our wonderful guest on and unmute her. Blessed be, Christine.
Blessed be, Christine. So nice to see you.
Blessed be.
Do you have some wine? Do you have some wine? I know you got some wine there somewhere. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Blessed be. Blessed be.
It's Diet Coke.
We love you anyway.
I know. I'm so excited, Miss Christine. What is our theme for today?
So it's funny because what Levi was mentioning and what Brian was mentioning kind of goes very well into what we're going to talk about today. Tonight, let's explore the themes of the old gods and their impacts on witchcraft and society today.
Down. I love that.
I don't think we've had this one yet. The gods.
The gods.
Right.
I love it.
The old gods, exactly.
May the gods preserve the craft from modern witches.
May God help us. We are modern witches.
I mean, you might.
I'd like to think so.
You, however, are timeless and ancient.
I've been watching Agatha, you know.
I know, right? Can we all sing the song at the end?
I don't know the song, but I love the song.
I did too.
Down the road, down the road.
So
down
good.
Witches.
So what is our first question, Christine?
So the first question is all about cultural relevance. How do you think the pantheons of the old gods and their history have influenced or are currently influencing modern witchcraft and its practices today? And let's start with Levi.
I think this is a very interesting question because in the early stages of the occult revival or the sort of like powerful occult movement that was going on around the time of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and Theosophy and all that, they really were not into pagan gods that much except as a tool to understand something deeper, right? it's like theosophy, and then you have anthroposophy, like Rudolf Steiner.
Or even the Golden Dawn.
And even Dion Fortune. Dion Fortune kind of never stopped being a Christian on some level, right? So they weren't really into that. It really was honestly, it was the witchcraft revival that kind of exploded this idea of, no, we're not talking about Jesus, right? We're not talking about Yahweh. We're talking about gods of the old pantheons, the pre-Christian peoples. So I think witchcraft had an enormous influence on popularizing that. Now I want to be clear: the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and other systems absolutely used the names of old gods, Isis, Osiris, all of that. But it was worked in a very different way, in my opinion, than the witchcraft elders brought it out, which was much more.
They weren't worshiping them.
Yeah, they were embodying them, they used the term like god forms. You see that a lot. But the elders of witchcraft, I don't think they ever use terms like that. I mean, they just say the gods, But I think that it's still influencing the debate today, and I think the biggest way it's influencing it is it's become a huge demarcator in the modern witchcraft and pagan community. When you ask people, do you believe the gods are separate or do you really believe they're unified? The whole soft polytheism versus hard polytheism debate. So I think that's probably where you see it come up the most in contemporary debates, is people who think that particular gods call them, that they're completely separate, isolate intelligences, and then you have the more theosophical or Neoplatonic or Hermetic kind of interpretation of the deities as all being reflections of a divine unity, which traditional witchcraft does believe. But that's where I see it the most. And I think beyond that, it's been our influence on pop culture. Like, I mean, the show Chaos just dropped on Netflix not that long ago. You have, Neil Gaiman, even though he's in the news for very bad reasons right now, was very popular with his Norse mythology book not that long ago. So I think pop culture has been massively influenced by it as well.
Miss Ellie, what's your take on it?
Wow, it's so many things we could talk about and say about it. Am I feeling... I just watched a great lecture by Mitch Horowitz on the Philosophical Research Society platform, and the topic was other intelligences, non-human intelligences. And of course he covers, Bigfoot and aliens, but he ends with a really great discussion on the gods as separate intelligences, and that he makes an argument against, I wanted to send you a clip for this video, against scientific materialism, and to move back towards the idea that there are other forms of intelligent life in the cosmos. Humans are not the only one, and it's not just humans and one God. That there are step downs, and this is Kabbalah, this is Neoplatonism, that there's a source of life, a source of consciousness, and that it internally steps itself down into the variety of gods that we see throughout history. An idea that came to me was how much the archaeology has done to try to discover what ancient peoples worshipped. And predominantly they do come up with a goddess, a female figure, fully robust, fertile, and often a phallic god image of some sort, or a god of the woods, or a god of nature, or a horned god, because that was similar to the beasts that they lived with and migrated with. And so I think the concept is been around since humans have been around, but what we tend to do, as soon as a culture or people come into a space, they start to annihilate those people's gods, say they're bad and wrong, and replace them with their own gods. And up to the point of Christianity, where we replace all gods with one God, one masculine God, so that we use it as a power play against people that we're trying to colonize or take over. So I think it's a great study to try to learn your basic mythologies through time and watch the change in the personalities, how they were portrayed, their symbols, their lifestyle, these gods, because they're really anthropomorphized energy fields. But for humans, we had to make them kind of look like us, because that's what we identify with. So I love the stories of the gods. Today, I think they're appropriated heavily, and no one pays much attention to that. They might worship gods from different pantheons, even different cultures. I think that's kind of a mix-up in your own brain, and I like the idea of maybe sticking to one group of gods for a few years until you really have learned them and integrated them. But I think the gods are real, and I think they sit up on Mount Olympus drinking their wine, kind of laughing at us century after century and saying, well, one day those little peanuts are finally figure it out.
Thank you.
I know the question, but I want you to rephrase it for me one more time.
Sure. Basically, what I was trying to ask was,
No,
what do you think
just
the
ask it
impact
again
of-
because there was so much that went on that I want to make sure I'm not trailing off.
Fair. What do you think that the impact of the old gods and their pantheons have had on witchcraft practices then and now?
Right, that's where my brain was, but I wanted to make sure.
Okay.
That's a very complicated question in a way, because unfortunately we've got a vast difference between what was going on during the witchcraft revival and what's going on in the modern world. So people are being exposed to information in books that had nothing to do with the witchcraft revival, and they lump it all together. So we didn't have a pantheon, and I don't think any of those pantheons had any influence. I think they have influence now because it's very clear that a lot of people who ascribe themselves to be witches are often trying to reconstruct pagan cultures, but that has nothing to do with the witchcraft revival. The witchcraft revival, we worship, the priesthood worship a god and a goddess, singularly. There's not a tribe, there's not a family, right? And these gods are emanations of all gods. So where it gets interesting is that the last vestige of what we would call paganism in the Roman Empire really followed suit with this. So when we think about our pagan ancestors, the last ones that were rivals of Christianity were sort of not thinking along the way that their predecessors did as much anymore. Obviously that occurs just like it occurs now. But when you're an initiate of, for say, one of my favorites, the cult of Isis, you really saw Isis as all goddesses, and she did indeed have a consort, Serapis, who actually looks a lot more like the Christian devil than Pan does, because he even comes with a pitchfork and an association with hell.
And the serpent.
Yes, and the serpent and all that. He's just been forgotten, and Serapis sounds kind of a little bit similar to another name we might hear. So when the witchcraft revival was coming into being, obviously there was a connection with the myth of Diana, and that's the only real cultural crossover we have, but it was clearly not the high Diana of Rome. It wasn't one of the 12 Olympians Diana. It was Diana of the woods, Diana of Nemesis, Diana of witchcraft, who had absorbed, at that point in time, in my opinion, Isis, Dionysus, Hecate, and a lot of other goddesses. And it doesn't matter whether there was really a cult or whether it's just an idea. We're drawing on that. And Gardner and his contemporaries were really approaching witchcraft as a folk religion. So the gods and the goddesses that we were usually approaching were found in folklore and not in the pantheons of the past. Although there was a pervading idea on Gardner's part that witchcraft originated with the Celts, he did not try to make it druidic, because he actually belonged to the ancient order of Druids, and he did not go that route, nor did he dedicate his life to that work. Because the Celts are very fluid. They didn't really have even though we try in modern times through the Romans to give them a pantheon like the Romans and the Greeks, we don't really know a lot about those gods. They sort of exist in folk tales and things that were recorded by monks in Wales and Ireland. So we worship a goddess who's all goddesses, who's also the queen of fairies. And we worship a god who's older than all other gods, who's also the king of fairies, and sometimes he's been called the devil, and so we're really taking a completely different approach than saying let's be Greek or let's be Roman or let's be Celtic or Egyptian even. But because we know that magic and pre-Christian religions have knowledge and influence, we play there. But the basic idea of craft is that all these gods are one, which is not the way that the typical Greek thought. It's not the way the typical Roman thought. It's probably not the way the typical Celt thought. But initiates might have thought that in various cults, and I think we know for a fact that they did. So that's my answer. I don't think it had an impact. I think it has an impact now, because people are practicing paganism and lumping it in with witchcraft.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, for the next one, we're going to get a little bit more personal. And we're going to start with Ellie. Ellie, can you share a little bit about your personal journey or experience that led you to embrace the god and goddess, either prior pantheons or the god and goddess of witchcraft as we know it?
Absolutely. Thank you. I tell the story repeatedly, but I always say, as a young child, beings, other intelligences, came to me into my psychic field of perception. So, of course, as a little kid, I couldn't make out what they were. It was pretty terrifying. And probably some of the things I was seeing was also, leftover human ghost residue. But so I began to identify out particularly a male deity. I mean, I would not have called it that when I was a child, but today I'm going to say a male deity, chthonic, darker, the god of the witches. I can say that now with fair certainty that that's who that was, but I certainly wouldn't have been able to verbalize that as a young person.
What is that little chant? Sweet, sweet, I'm going to eat your feet. How does that go?
Oh, they get your feet and you can't hang them off the bed. And I had a bed that had wooden spindles and they could reach through the wooden spindles and get my feet. So I had to sleep curled up at the head of my bed because there were spindles at the head of my bed. I had to pack pillows back there so they couldn't reach in and get my hair. It was hard being me when I was little. It was. So a really energetically defined male being that I would call today probably chthonic and eternal, even though we today look at our male god as in the cycle of birth and death, and that the goddess is eternal. It took quite a while for female forms to really start showing up for me. Probably not until like high school did I really start to begin to perceive and identify an equally powerful female being. And she was older. I wouldn't say that I identified like some beautiful, long-haired, luscious young woman. That's not really.
Was it Sheila Nagig? Is that who you
No, God. No, but I know Sheila Nagee.
I think I saw her at the Golden Lantern.
Right? Well, I was there too before the ritual with Carrie. No, Sheila Nagee is definitely at the Golden Lantern.
My God.
So these were, I couldn't define them, I couldn't label them. These were just ancient archetypal beings, one male, one female. And I would have to say, in my experience, more chthonic, darker, underworld beings. To me, that's how I describe them. But I always felt there were two, and they were represented in different cultures and mythologies and different clothing. And then as I became, really started studying witchcraft at the end of high school and in college, historically, and then what was published at the time, which was the early 80s, so that was all Llewellyn and Scott Cunningham. And I immediately just said, I don't think some of this stuff's right. It just isn't jiving with what I experienced.
I need to talk to you about Wicca, Ellie.
Wicca. They talked to me about Wicca. So then I really started to read and study, and that's when I think the god and the goddess began to come through stronger because I had more vocabulary and more knowledge of them. And then they are very strong today. I've asked myself a lot, are they the same god and goddess that we worship in Alexandrian witchcraft? I'm going to say for me, they are not. I have older gods that came to me early, and then I've learned to make friends with our deity forms that we use, but they're pretty different for me. I'll just be honest about it. Pretty different for me. That's my answer, strange as it is.
Thank you. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Brian.
I thought I already answered this question. What's this question? Sorry. What was the question again?
This is more about how your personal journey led you to the older god pantheon, god and goddess pantheons, and to the god and goddess of witchcraft as we know it.
Well, I mean, I definitely went through a period of, everyone's heard the story of when I started exploring witchcraft and reading books, and I guess not everyone's heard it, but I feel like we've all heard it 1,000 times, that I, when I was 15 years old, I purchased from the mall a Big Blue Book by Raymond Buckland, and I'd already read other books on witchcraft, but they were like little spell books and things like that. So as I read this, I was being introduced to all these new ideas, and it was in that book that I was first introduced to the god of the witches as not being the devil, and where I was first introduced to the goddess as a concept that was like being living in practice. So that was probably I'd have to say that was my introduction, because that was just mind-blowing to my 15-year-old brain that there were entire cultures that had worshipped a goddess, that there were people still doing it now, and it resonated with me as a truth. So that started that out for me. It wasn't till much later that I got pulled down the pagan rabbit hole and started exploring what I'd almost reduce to correspondences of gods, you know. But for the most part, I've always believed all gods are one god and all goddesses are one goddess. So when I experience people thinking differently, I just know that they don't have the same mind I do, you know. But that's how I look at it. I certainly think it's a complex subject matter because it goes into claiming things you can't prove, right? So it's a philosophical concept. And I definitely think it's the way God talks to us, the way the creative force talks to us, or that we talk to it, or how it interacts with us through art and ritual and emotion. And so for me, it's like there's such a thing as goddess consciousness, you know, and I can see the goddess in all things. It's easy for me to see my goddess in Kali or Kuan Yin. Do I personally, you know, work with those aspects? No, not really. You know, I might have statues around or something like that, but it can change because it is going to be personal. It's going to be a personal expression. And when you meet a face of the goddess that is different than one you've known before, it does appear to be a different being, but I don't think it really is. I think it's how we're compartmentalizing it. You know, like how Ellie might see me is going to be different than how my husband sees me, or different than how my dog sees me, you know, but I'm still the same person. But am I? Because there's these unique perspectives of what this thing is, and not everyone can see around the whole thing. So there are parts of God, I think, you never see, you know, no matter how much you study. There are parts of God in a single life that you're never going to see. You can't see the whole thing. So I don't know if that answers the question.
That's a great
I think
answer.
it was the work of a public witch, a public initiate, who awakened me to the goddess. Yeah.
Recipe.
Uncle Bucky, who I never got to meet, but I admired so much. Yeah.
They have a museum to him up here that I still have not made it to, Buckland's Museum of Witchcraft. It's not even an hour away. I have to get there.
Yeah, you got to do it.
Yeah.
Levi.
So I don't have a pagan or a Wiccan phase. When I was younger, I was a Catholic by choice. I don't have. I've always loved mythology, though, obsessively. Almost did. I absolutely adore studying myth. I just think it's beautiful. I think it's cool. I don't care what the framework is, whether it's like pure archaeological study or historical study versus some sort of Jungian or Campbellian kind of stuff. I love it all. I just love myth. I will say philosophically, though, I am deeply, radically monistic. I do not believe in...
Here we go again.
In separation.
I am the
right?
odd man out. I'm very strange.
I don't think it's strange. I think that's normal in the occult revival. I mean, you know, most of, you know, hard polytheism was
I think it's
very rare thing.
Common in initiates of any mystery.
You know, it was a very rare thing in the occult revival. They were, you know, almost all monists, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Blavatsky was a monist. You know, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is monistic. On some level, Crowley is monistic.
I mean, in a way, the Masons
pretending to be an
are,
atheist,
because they just require that you believe in God. They don't require how you do it.
But I don't. I think at the basis of reality is something like a mind, and we call that God, right?
Consciousness.
You know, yeah. At the base of all consciousness, the base of all reality, to me, is something like mind. There's intentionality even in matter, in my opinion. There's intentionality even in biological life forms. I believe intentionality is at the core of existence. This is an idea common in idealism and continental philosophy. It's an idea common in non-physicalist interpretations of the philosophy of mind. So we call that God. So I'm pretty far down that rabbit hole. So I think that if I worship Diana, for example, there's not a being somewhere in the universe that is separable called Diana necessarily. There is a contraction. You know, a boundary that I'm creating mentally to understand something. But so my journey to the gods has almost always been rooted in some form of a monistic philosophy, and there's lots of them that I adore. I'm not beholden to any of them.
But sometimes he's just screaming in the woods.
Sure. But like, I'm very beholden to Neoplatonism. I'm very beholden to Kabbalah. I'm very beholden to Vedanta, to Kashmir Shaivism and Abhinavagupta and stuff like that. You know, even certain concepts of Tathagata in Mahayana Buddhism and whatnot from the Tiantai school, like there's lots of those that I can jive with, because I think they're all hitting on this powerful realization of the witness of consciousness, the thing that knows itself. So at the end, all gods, it's not just all, for me, it's even more extreme than saying all gods are one God. I go even further. Everything is God experiencing God's self. Witness and object and subject collapsing.
Both, right?
Right. So to me, it's all God knowing God's self, is what I would say. And that's my journey to the gods. It's always been through that lens.
That is a very wide and very focused lens all at the same time. I think that I approach things a little bit more simply. For me, although I have a background like Levi's, where I grew up Catholic, was confirmed Catholic, throughout time, I knew that there was more, and I kept knocking on those doors and finding out what else was out there, because reading the Big Blue Book, seeing and being exposed to the mythology of other pantheons and things like that, this just resonated a lot more. It made a lot more sense because it replicated what I saw in the natural world. And to me, being a very young person just starting out, it made more sense. There was a divine masculine and a divine feminine. There was a god and goddess, Hera and Zeus, Poseidon and Amphitrite, Persephone and Hades. There was always a point counterpoint. And the funny thing is, the longer I've continued on my magical journey, the more everything that I've learned and everything I've experienced has kind of reinforced exactly what I started out for. Now, some people would say you're letting things that don't fit your worldview or your ritualistic view fall away. But I don't think that that's it. I think that it's just become more all-encompassing.
Okay. I'd also say that's also okay.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to, let all other
No. I think that all points and counterpoints are valid because we're all on our own journey, right?
Yeah. I love that question. What's our next question?
Our next question. Modern interpretations. So, in what ways have contemporary interpretations of old gods evolved compared to what they were before, what their historical beliefs were, or what they were written to be? We know that gods and goddesses evolve over time. What have we seen in the past that now in popular witchcraft or modern day is different?
Me, choose me.
Okay,
Brilliant.
I'm choosing you.
I'm pulling Ellie's Jedi mind trick.
Right.
I think they're completely changed because we're not those people. I think that's a huge mistake that we make sometimes, to think that we can actually have the same mind that someone had 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, and we're looking at through our own lens, right? So, let's take a modern Viking reconstructionist and take them and their motorcycle and their beer gut and their racism and compare them with a real Viking. There's just not going to be a comparison, is there? So we're inspired by these things. As much as I think I fit the entire model of a Ptolemaic pharaoh, I'm probably different.
You're not going to marry your siblings, for one thing.
Well, I mean, if they were hot. But anyway.
Or murder them.
Well, that could be possible. But, I just think it's okay for us to realize we're not those people anymore, and that the gods can change too. I think we spend a lot of time saying, well, that's not how that was in the ancient world. You're not doing what they did. And I'm like, no one is.
Yeah, because I also don't want to oppress women.
No one's worshiping Hera like they worshipped Hera in, her city or something. Like, that's not happening anymore, but people are still worshiping her. So I think they get to change too, because we're having relationships with our ideas of these things, as Levi was kind of saying, because I really look at religious expression and art as being, I don't want to reduce it just to being like Jungian or something, but it is definitely going to be individual. Like when I invoke the idea of Hera in my mind, it could be a little different than how Levi does, but neither one of them, I can assure you, are exactly like some ancient Greek person's was, because we didn't experience the reality of just fully believing she was real and she was the only queen of heaven. Like that was their thought process. So there weren't as many skeptics back then, so to speak. So I just think it's impossible for us to really feel. I think it would be delusional of us to think that we are exactly as they were. As just as much as if there was a medieval witch cult hiding in the woods that we're exactly the same as them either, because we're just having different experiences. We're in different cultures, we're in different times, we have different mindsets, and we're probably more crazy. That's
Probably.
Right, I was going to say, I think we're definitely crazy, more crazy.
I mean, we know too much. We've just been ruined, really, honestly. So,
Ellie, do you want to take that one on?
I felt in my mind, I saw the cartoonization of the gods. Like today's world, if you talk to young people, like 10-year-olds about the gods, they'll start telling you a video game that they play that has these beings in it. And we do have a lot more of animated drawings of gods, and to me, they have sort of been reduced to an artistic representation that's just very pop culture. Andy Warhol should have done a series instead of soup cans. It should have been the gods. I think it would have been great. I look at the gods, too, through time as examples of art, the way they're clothed, their hair, the way they're presented in look. That's an interesting coffee table book, I think, to take a god form like Hera and show all the examples of her throughout, the different regions and how she was depicted in different areas.
which could be vastly different.
Vastly different. So I do kind of look at them as an art semblance, and that the culture modifies it and makes the gods look like they want them to. Of course, look like yourself. I mean, I think goddesses have curly blonde hair, green eyes, and great boobies, just like me. So I do think we do a lot of anthropomorphizing, but I look at them as artistic examples, and they've changed a lot. But today I feel more sad about them because they seem to be being reduced to cartoons where their power is really emasculated. And I'd like to see them back in their ferocious...
Some of you should go to a museum.
Right, I was thinking that. We need more education in art history.
Don't you feel like those museums are temples, really?
They can feel like it.
Temples. I think Levi's going to go and blow us all away now, but I think I'd like to ask you all. I think that what I was trying to say is that it's okay to let these things evolve.
Yes.
And it's okay to let these things just exist as they are.
Right.
We don't need to always be looking to the past for our answers.
No, I could not agree more with that. I think that one of the things that annoys me is this idea that there even is, to begin with, such a thing as a form, as a deity in history that you can put into a box at all. How Diana was worshipped in Rome or in Lake Nemi is nothing the way Artemis was worshipped at the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, right? The way Isis is worshipped in the oldest text we have is radically different than what she becomes in Ptolemaic Egypt with Serapis as her consort and with Harpocrates as her child. They're not, but they're the same God, right? But they're massively different, even in the time periods when they were worshipped. And they were different city to city.
I love that.
That's a huge thing.
I love the scenes in American Gods where there's 50 Jesuses.
Yeah, there's tons of them, right?
There's a whole bunch of different Jesuses because they're all just different people's ideas of Jesus.
For someone to be I really want to make sure I
Hispanic
worship
Jesus, Black Jesus.
When I want to make sure that I worship Zeus the right way. Which Zeus? Right? The Zeus at Olympia?
What's the right way?
The Zeus in Ptolemaic Egypt with the ram horns? which Zeus? And so I just get I think it's a tiresome thing. And I also think it's okay for us to modernize mythology. I don't think that's evil. I think, for example, there's been this huge push to sort of reimagine Persephone as a willing bride as opposed to a victim. And I think, what's funny is there are actual historical records where, for example, in Sicily in southern Italy, the image of Proserpina and Pluto was of a king and a queen, and not of a victim and an evil god.
People need to lighten up and realize some ladies like a forceful man.
But
I know I do. But sometimes you got to be choked and told what to do, Levi.
Yeah, not the Persephone myth though, because it's assault. But I think that there's a desire to take.
It's only assault if it's not welcomed.
Well, yeah, it wasn't in the story, but I think that
also comes from the old tribal customs where that was. I think this is my idea of it. The old tribal customs where there were certain cultures where you were supposed to go kidnap a woman. That was the way you got married.
Yeah, it was a great moral evil that was allowed.
Yeah.
But I think that the desire to see that story in a different light doesn't bother me in the least. Or I think that there's nothing wrong with trying to take a story that at one point would have been used to harm a group. So stories of foreign gods being evil.
Ellie's got thoughts going in her head.
foreign gods being evil. For example, Seth in Egypt as a god of evil foreigners, or Hera being a wicked and vicious catty wife or whatever. I think updating that or changing our perspective about it is fine because they're not static.
Christine, can Johnny Depp kidnap you in a caustic way?
If he asks nicely. So, I'm glad you brought up Set because I'm okay with God's changing and everything else. And I loved what you said, both Levi and Ellie, and also what you brought to the table, Brian. But when you change the storyline completely, I think that's when it becomes a little bit uncomfortable for me. I just watched Tom Cruise in The Mummy, and they kept calling Set the god of death.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a major problem with that. Now,
there's a difference between changing things and being just blatantly inaccurate.
Right.
Right, exactly. I'm okay with saying he was the god of disorder, but what they missed was back in the day, he was actually had a huge following, and his job was to cause disorder for the enemies of Egypt, not for the Egyptians themselves.
I mean, there are pharaohs named after him.
He represented in my opinion, he was like the head god of older dynasties. And so a lot of those, like the Egyptians were famous for being like, now we're the popular cult, so we're going to rewrite the whole story.
Exactly.
Like now our God is actually that God, and actually that God was, like they did that over.
And your God is a loser. They very
totally were very good on that. Yeah, 4,000 years.
And your God is now a demon. Imagine, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. I think I'm going to skip over question 4, maybe go to question 5.
Ooh.
Okay. How about this one? Perceptions and misconceptions. What are some common misconceptions about witchcraft and the worship of all gods in general that you have encountered in your practice? And this time, Brian, I know that you want me to start with you, but I'm going to start with Ellie.
What do we say that again though? What are the perceptions in modern witchcraft about the gods that I don't agree with or think are kind of offensive?
No, what are some common misconceptions that others have about the gods of witchcraft or the pre-Christian gods in general that you've encountered in your practice?
Well, I think people tend to go towards a fluffy, light view of the gods of witchcraft, that they're kind, they're loving, the mother goddess, she loves everyone, they're good, they care about us a lot. I'm not sure they really, our initiatory gods that we work with care about us a lot. We are their particular tribe or people. Too fluffy, I think, too white light, that they're not grounded in real forces, that the gods aren't very balanced, they're all good. They're either all good or all negative. They're not very nuanced personality-wise. I think lack of study, is kind of difficult because people are talking about all kinds of stuff about the gods and they really didn't do much research or study. That's kind of a misconception, I think, about just... And also that we don't know. A lot of it is conjecture by archaeological finds. We don't have writing about the early gods until we started writing in 3000 BC or so. And we just make things up and say, well, Neanderthal believed this about the goddess. We have no idea, really. We're just projecting our minds into the mind of older, our precursors. And Brian and Levi have both said that. We don't know, and we're making leaps of faith to try to guess what our ancient ancestors really believed about the gods. I think probably the biggest misconception is that the gods are kind of flat, they're not nuanced, and that they're all of witchcraft, they love us, and they're all really nice. I think they're pretty hard on us, and they don't love us every day. That's my answer.
It's a fantastic answer. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Levi.
Misconceptions about the old gods or of the witchcraft gods in particular. The biggest one I think that I run into is that anything besides hard polytheism is an ahistorical approach to the gods or a modern smuggled in of Eastern philosophy that came through theosophy. This is not true. Neoplatonism was pagan. They were all pagans,
Yes, right.
until you get your first couple of Christian ones like Dionysius the Areopagite and whatnot.
There was witches before there were witches.
There were lots. I mean, Stoicism is pagan, and they believe in the Logos, the one unified sort of like rationality beneath all of existence. So the idea that all ancient people had a very hard polytheistic or very animistic view of the gods is just not true. Also, Hinduism is incredibly old, and it has a deep monistic philosophy in many of its schools. Not all of them, but many of them. Most of them, I would argue, are monistic. I think that you see concepts of this in Taoism, where you have gods as manifestations of the Tao, right, which is one unified concept. So I think that's the biggest misconception, is that if you're doing anything besides hard polytheism, you're not doing it right, right? You're doing something hokey or new agey or Christian light or whatever, and that's just not true. Now, was it the most common? No, of course not. It was popular amongst intellectual elites. Neoplatonism was not common amongst the masses. In most cases, it was a school. It was a philosophical school. So I think that's the biggest misconception I see. And of course, I'm not naming the really broad ones that I think we all know, like we don't worship Satan. And of course, those are just silly misconceptions from fundamentalists. But yeah, I would say that's the one I see the most common.
Right?
The most common one is that people don't realize that we have them. The general population doesn't realize that we actually have our own gods. So, shameless plug, in my book, The Religion of Witchcraft, I have a chapter called The Devil and Deanna. Because as I was writing this book and its previous book, I was thinking a lot about what were we tapping into, and what actually Elias often talks about picking up the strand, at a certain point in time, which I agree that modern witchcraft is a reincarnation of something older. The strand that we tapped into can best be expressed by the Devil and Deanna. Those are the historic medieval iconographies of our gods, which confuses people. Deanna, people can kind of get. This was the last goddess of the pagans. It's recorded. She's, if you've studied, now to an outsider, Deanna is not going to make any sense at all. But if you've studied the witchcraft mythology, of course, that one's going to make sense. What confuses people is because our elders both educated us about the god of the witches, who was the devil, and educated society that we did not worship the devil simultaneously. Because what they were saying is our God, whom they called the devil, was not really the devil of the Christians. It's a completely separate devil. But that's who we were worshiping. There was never a witches didn't worship the devil. It was that the Christians got it wrong. And when you read the witch trials, when you read things about this witchcraft god, this witchcraft devil, it has nothing to do with the Bible. He, there's some nefarious things like eating babies and some things like cannibalism. That comes up. But for the most part, he wants you to go into the woods and commit the sins of fornication. He wants you to commit the sins of dancing. He wants you to commit the sins of drinking. He wants you, and then he's going to give you magical powers. I mean, this sounds like a really good time to me, really, honestly. So this is the first thing we're plugging into when we talk about the modern witchcraft revival. This is what our elders were plugging into, but they went down the rabbit hole and they said, this is older than this. And Big Mama and Big Daddy can be found throughout many cultures and through many mystery cults that they were emerging, and these are all the same thing, and they went back to what we know about the earliest forms of religion, and they said, this is the first, what we are contacting here is simultaneously these folk figures surrounding medieval witchcraft, all the way back to the very first primordial gods of humanity, which represented death and fertility, fertility and hunting, all those sorts of provider things. And that these entities manifested throughout every culture and every part of the world, but they were the oldest thing, which is where you got the phrase that we started saying we're the oldest religion in the world, and got tied to the old religion, which used to be the Catholics, but it got tied to us being called the old religion. Well, we're not the oldest religion in the world, but we do claim to worship the oldest gods in the world. So you're tapping into a lot of things. What we're not actually doing, regardless of anyone's opinions, including our elders, because even though Gardner thought that witchcraft came from the Celts. That's because he was in England, and that's an older people in England. He didn't actually like act on that. You know, if he was going to act on that, he would have stuck with the Druids. You know, I mean, that's my opinion. And because I think even he knew that witchcraft had a broader European connection that he would have had to have cut off in order to create this Celtic reconstruction. So I think most people don't understand we do have a god, we do have a goddess. Yes, in every aspect of Gardnerian and Alexandrian priesthood, there may be variances to how we say their names among each other, because they're sacred names, we don't share them, but we also have a secret name of the goddess. So we have a high secret name that is not known to the general public and never can be. So we do actually have it, but you know, we share with you guys that our philosophy is all gods are one god, all goddesses one goddesses, or the one, whatever, however you want to express it, and these are all emanations of it. You know, where I think things have gone awry is that people started just picking, like, I'm going to pick my lord and lady, and I'm going to have a patron god and goddess, and it just kept going down these rabbit holes. And then there was a search for authenticity, which led to hard polytheism connecting to witchcraft. You know, and people who have their own practices of folk magic, whatever, connecting to their own culture, or what they identify as their own culture, and saying, well, these are my gods. These are gods of my ancestors. And so now I'm going to study this whole pantheon, and that's going to be my thing. They're not practicing witchcraft. Witchcraft doesn't have a pantheon in that way. Our pantheon would be very Neoplatonic, because it's what would you call it? A divine ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, we've got other beings, obviously, but anyway, that's what I have to say about it. People don't know we have our own gods. They think that anything that's associated with witchcraft is our god. And that is true and false at the same time.
Right.
Levi?
Wait, I already went.
Yeah, I was the last one.
Brian was last.
We're all being very long-winded because these questions are good.
They're good questions.
No.
No, and I'm getting lost in the answers. They're very good.
So are we.
Very good answers.
So are we. We're getting lost in the answers.
So, how much time do we have left? So I want to make sure I get the best one or two questions.
You're very good.
Yeah, you're good on time.
We have an entire hour. Okay. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, this kind of goes along with the last question, which is cultural appropriation. What are your thoughts on the line between honoring the old traditions and cultural appropriation in modern witchcraft? And this time we will start with
Ellie. Pick Ellie.
Oh, I picked Ellie last time.
You get to pick who you want. If you want to pick Levi.
Yeah, she did.
I did.
I don't think...
Does my head look too big?
No. We'll talk to Diana, though.
Right. How's my hair?
I know, right? We'll talk to Ellie's mother.
Fantastic.
I think I have a very specific... I think this is not as complicated as I think people try to make it. If you are using something that does not come from your culture abusively to make money in a charlatan kind of way, then you're culturally appropriating. If you enter into a space you're invited into respectfully and learn about it, you're not. It's that, I mean, I just don't think it's that complicated. I really don't. You know, I think the debates get heated, but like, you know, yeah, there are tons of people who, like, for example, someone appropriating a native craft and then selling it as their own to make a profit without giving credit or money to the artisans who actually create it, that's appropriation. And it represents the spiritual traditions of that group. That's cultural appropriation of a spiritual or religious sense. Joining a religion of a group that you are not native to by invitation, which is almost always how it works, right? And respectfully and learning about it is not. You know, I think that's been going on for a long time. So yeah, I think in the modern world, in the ancient world, it's a whole different combo and it didn't really exist. But like, because I mean, gods were fluid. You know, you mixed them together. You had Roman Celtic gods like Sulis Minerva. You had Epona become a massive god in the Roman military, but she was a Celtic goddess. You had Isis, Hellenized in Greece and then taken to Rome. You had, Kabili, the Magna Mater, starts in Turkey and then becomes a goddess in Greece and then becomes a different form of herself in Rome. So like, lots of fluidity. But in the modern world, I think that's the simple rule. You know, if you are abusing something that's not your own, in an effort in bad faith to make money and be cruel, then yeah, it's appropriation. And beyond that, it's not.
Thank you. Ellie?
Well, I know it's a big topic about cultural appropriation. I do like Levi's definition. I'm obviously a huge advocate for education, and I think witches who practice the religion of witchcraft and people who are doing pagan reconstruction study owe it to themselves to study widely read about other traditions, learn the proper history of the other religions and traditions so that we can keep ourselves in context. We understand how we developed and where we fit into the world. But I totally agree with Levi. If you weren't raised in something from your cultural, your family, childhood, and then you start studying it, and then all of a sudden you become that, whether you're initiated and invited in or you just take it on your own, and then you start to teach it. This was one of the definitions that I heard from a respected elder in another tradition. If you start to teach it or make money on it, you are appropriating culture that is not really yours. But I also look at how long we've been on the planet and how many cultures there have been and how much crossover and fertilization there has been from culture to culture. And yes, a lot of it's negative because someone colonized an area and then, of course, took over those gods and mixed those gods with their own gods. I think it's almost inevitable that humans are going to do that. But if it goes back to good education, you can discuss when it happened and where it happened and how God forms were appropriated. But I think this is an interesting idea. I believe, I'm not taking away from the subject of is there one God or more than one God. I certainly believe that the Sephira of the Tree of Life are independent entities that are part of the one. And they each have their clothing, their flavoring, their correspondences. And I think those things are universal and real, and that especially the gods we worship are real beings that are timeless and they have their own energy pattern, and it's pretty obvious, well, after time, to recognize who they are and know that that's who they are. And then in witchcraft, though, how many different people practice the religion of witchcraft? All cultures, all races, all ages, modern witchcraft. Is that appropriation? If those gods accept you and work with you and identify with you, they've kind of appropriated us. And I think it happens both ways. And I think it boils down to the gods choose us, their proper children, the people that they want to work with, the humans they want to work with, because we love them and we're loyal to them and we recognize them as true and real. I don't know where I'm going with this answer, but I think
I might need a shot of that whiskey for this question.
I know, it goes both ways. It goes both ways. Get a lot of education, learn your history.
And don't be an asshole. It's a very simple rule in life.
And then don't take things from others that are not yours.
Ellie was tipped an entire bottle of whiskey today.
Let me show it.
It's like reminds me of people giving the doctor chicken.
It's like she literally just got, somebody gave this to Ellie as a tip.
Yeah, they probably
It's a big bottle of Maker's Mark. Oh. Tennessee, Kentucky.
Oh my God, they left the price tag on it, $76.
They wanted you to know what your tip was worth.
I love that.
So there's so many places I could go with this, because this is both something I care about and a soapbox. You know, I'll start out by saying I don't think any religion on earth has ever been more culturally appropriated than modern witchcraft, but that might be me just being jaded. Cultural appropriation is in the word cultural appropriation, not religious appropriation. These are two separate things. So it was born out of a good place. It's a place that should still exist, but people take it too far. And people are also idiots. You know, I remember this place in time where people were going on and on about tarot cards should only be used by the Romney people. Am I saying that right, Romney people?
The Romney people?
And it just simply isn't true. You know, most Romney people played with regular playing cards that didn't use tarot cards. So the tarot cards were brought to us by the Golden Dawn, pretty much. So they weren't running around with that. They were playing with regular playing cards and reading fortunes and doing all other kinds of fortunes too, palmistry and all that sort of thing. And they don't care. There's no Romney people out there being like, tarot cards are my people's. Like, it's not happening. You know, when I was a kid, I, grew up across the street for a portion of my life to a Catholic Native American family who had a fusion of these beliefs. You know, they were Catholics, but they were also Native American. As time went on, they became more a Native American and less Catholic. But they would just share things. You know, this is how we pray. And they taught me how to smudge. It was not, weird, and if
it's beautiful.
Yeah, if you go into Asian cultures, a lot of, I don't want to misquote this because I think it's the Japanese, but they actually promote that. They really enjoy when people embrace
participate in Shinto rituals.
Yes.
Yeah, they want you to wash your hands and pray the kami and whatnot.
And
you're welcome to.
Giving you a kimono to go home with and stuff like that. They don't have a thing with that. That's not. So I think sometimes I'm going to say this as blatant as I can because I know this is a little bit wrong because I've seen other people do it too. But some of you white people need to mind your own business. Some of you straight white people need to mind your own business because you jump into these causes when the people actually involved don't care. You know, so if I want to worship a big black lady in the sky, no one is going to tell me I can't do it. And it's none of your business. So I have a lot of feelings about this because it sort of reminds me of so many different topics we could bring up when some sort of activation came into our social consciousness that came out of a good place, and then in a year or two it just becomes very dark. Mm-hmm. I do not believe, there's a few nuances to this, I do not believe for the most part anyone, and I do believe in reincarnation, I don't believe anyone has the right to tell you how to worship. Absolutely not. Cultural appropriation means don't steal the Navajo lady's family stitchings.
Right.
You know, don't go replicate the corn mandalas that are being made by old Mexican women to sell them in your corporation. You know, all the stuff Levi was saying. You know, that stuff's horrible. And I think if you just, as Levi said, don't be a dick, you're going to be pretty well aware.
You're going to get far, yeah.
Now, when it comes to modern European witchcraft or paganism, most of the cultures we're dealing with are dead. Mm-hmm. You know, yes, they're still Greek people, but they're not practicing.
No, they're Christians.
Yeah, they're not practicing, you know, ancient Greek religion. There is no appropriation there. You know, so it's just silly for the most part. I don't think cultural appropriation belongs, for the most part, in a religious conversation. And if it does, I think we should leave that authority to the people involved. You know, so you could accuse somebody who grew up as a Navajo, was raised in that tribe's spirituality. They have the right to say, you shouldn't be doing this for my people. But I can almost 100% guarantee you they're not going to. You know, yes, they might make fun of the white guy with the crystal who named himself Father Bobcat, but they don't really care that much because they know he's not doing it right anyway. So, you know, I think art and that kind of thing, you know, and nowadays the reservations are handling that. You know, they'll sue people. So, you know, those movements I totally support. I just don't think it's a religious conversation for the most part. I think there may be some circumstances that there are, but you know, Betty Sue from Wisconsin is not the person to tell you.
Correct.
So anyway, that's my thoughts.
No, I agree with that. Let groups speak for themselves. That's a great point.
Do you guys think that it's possible that gods come to us and choose us from different places, that maybe there's a god that might come to a person because they live in a neighborhood or a location that's not their cultural god, but the god comes to the human?
I don't really know how to respond to that. Because it would imply that I understood the consciousness of a god. Because it sounds like it belongs a bit in the realm of fantasy. But I do think we connect different things at different times. And if you are living, like, for instance, in New Orleans, you might think about things,
right,
or be exposed to things. So I can't say whether that's the god or you. I don't know. The chicken,
right,
the chicken or the egg. I don't really know.
Is it unverified?
I think
personal
it's co-creation. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
But certainly, yes. Every time I go on a vacation or something, you know, I get very interested in the things around there. But I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question.
What is your next question for us, Miss Christine?
The next question is around challenges and stigmas. What challenges do each of you face as practitioners of witchcraft, the worship of a pre-Christian god and goddess, in a society like ours here in the United States that may not fully understand or accept these beliefs?
Who do you want to start with?
Ellie.
Well, we've kind of touched on this in a few episodes, like in a personal experience. Like I said, moving to New Orleans has been very freeing for me because our particular city is quite full of different styles of religion, spiritual studies, and worship. And it's all looked at, especially from tourists, even the Wisconsin and Ohioan tourists, with kind of an eye of interest and intrigue. You know, look at these strange people, what are they doing? But I haven't been treated rudely or mistreated living here, practicing witchcraft and being a public known witch and
people
priestess.
Give her chickens and bottles of booze.
And bottles of whiskey.
Right? But
There you go.
I go back to my years in Florida, which was more conservative environment and definitely more Baptist and Christian. I was just very careful then to not stand out. I mean, I obviously stood out from the crowd because I was always outspoken and said what I thought. But I wasn't trying to offend people or really get in trouble with my religious interests or practices. But I sure do hear as a reader.
Levi, stop looking like a Protestant.
I hear as a reader, sweet people of any age come into my booth and they're called. They feel that certain gods have come to them. They feel called and they want to start learning and practicing something other than Christianity. And many of them are really frightened about it. They still think, well, somebody might egg my house or key my car, or what if they treat my child poorly in school? So I know it's still prevalent. I know it's happening all throughout the U.S., and I think we're kind of heading in more of a conservative direction politically, and it's one of my anxieties for the future. Will we continue to have the religious freedoms we have today? But even though we have the religious freedoms on paper, is that the way people experience it? Like I said,
Ellie, if it gets that, you can come with me. We'll think about inviting Levi, and we'll go see King Charles.
We're going to elope to England. So
if you behave.
I think
No,
it's kind
only
of
in England.
right. I think it's kind of similar to people who are gay and they've had to come out maybe in the 40s or 50s before it was very prevalent that you would come out. And I think it's kind of true.
I mean,
of
England is
religion.
our Hades, so it makes sense,
Right.
really. Let's
So-
go there for refuge.
So I haven't had too many
They
personal
don't care what
problems.
religion you are. They think it's all fake.
It's true.
It is all. I haven't had too many personal problems, but I certainly talk to people who have real fear and they feel that they'll be excommunicated from their family. I think that's probably one of the most painful examples.
Yeah.
And the person's so authentic. You can just see the goddess is just standing next to them, and they're terrified to do that work because their family would push them out forever. That's real. It's still all over the U.S. and probably in other Western, countries. And it just goes back to humans not having good compassion, not understanding each other and caring about the diversity of religion. So I'm going to keep saying what I think about it, to encourage others to study what they want, follow their heart, worship the gods that they love, and not be afraid about it. We have to do it together. Blessed be.
Blessed be. Brian.
I don't have that problem. Like I don't know. I think I'm just so delusional in a bubble or whatever that nobody comes to me and is like, "Oh my God, you're a witch." It just doesn't happen.
No.
So
Never?
rephrase the question real quick so I can get something intelligent out.
No. Basically, what challenges have you faced?
I mean, when I was younger, I did.
Yeah, so it
obviously.
doesn't have to be right this minute, but in your journey, being
just
a witchcraft practitioner.
I'll say the most modern one. Even though I'm a priest, a high priest, which sort of implies something, I have people who've come on my wall and just get pissed off and say witchcraft isn't a religion, which when it happens on my wall is a quick block and delete, because I can't think of anything ruder than going into someone's personal space and saying your religion's not real, so that would probably be the biggest overall struggle, which I did encounter when I was younger too. And it didn't matter whether you said witchcraft or Wicca; it wasn't a real religion,
Yeah.
So it, I think we get more pushback with the word witchcraft because it belongs. One of the reasons why people like the word Wicca is you don't encounter it in fairy tales, right? So because it's made up, so it didn't exist in history that way. So soapbox, need to talk to you about Wicca. So I just think that that's probably the biggest one that I still fight today, is that we are religion, that we have a priesthood, that we have our own gods, that we have our own holy book, that we have our own laws, that we have, people just don't know. And there are thousands of people who identify as witches who don't know. They just don't know it exists. They think, they think Gerald Gardner invented Scott Cunningham, which from a certain point of view, I suppose is true, but he would probably have blown Scott Cunningham's head off with a shotgun, if you were to ask me. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
Dark.
But I don't think Gardner would have liked Scott Cunningham.
I don't think they would have even had anything in common.
No.
I don't.
No.
Nothing to talk about.
No. So that's probably been it. But I'm also very much in a bubble, so I don't really spend a lot of time with people that would have an issue with it. I guess the closest I had was when we had the Christian protesters at the last circle.
Yeah.
and that was...
And that's almost fun. You're like, oh, look, fans.
Well, I mean, I told the witches to ignore them, and the witches did not listen to me. So
The head witch, the main witch, did
no
not
one
listen.
listened. No, Shelby climbed that tree. Shelby attacked the guy practically. I think Shelby was so enraged that the guy came and put the cross right next to me in the altar.
Mm-hmm.
Shelby couldn't help it himself. He wasn't listening to me at all. He just turned into a rabid dog.
Our little peanut hero,
Yeah.
Shelby.
If he could have gotten in a fight, he would have.
I miss Shelby. He's gone right now. He's in Salem. And I said today, I miss Shelby. I miss my Shelby.
Something tells me he misses us.
Mm-hmm.
But
Levi. I have a question for you guys, too, about this. I can't wait to hear Levi.
I have never been, I don't hang around fundamentalists and stuff, so it's sort of not a thing.
Bubble,
I will say, though, there is a place where I do feel very othered and I get a lot of negativity. There are things that are very important to me that I love, and I don't care whether or not other people love them. And some of those things are academic in
Knitting.
nature. I love knitting, yeah.
I didn't
knitting.
know that about you.
But,
you've concealed that from me, I think.
Christine knows it. I knit her a shawl for her.
I don't think I knew.
So I think I do get it in one way, and this is going to sound awkward. I think that a lot of people in the witchcraft, pagan, and magical spaces do not understand what the wider sort of academic community or other theological communities think about this religion.
Absolutely not.
It's changing, thank
Yeah.
God. There are people are opening their minds, but it is viewed as the most sort of ridiculous,
Because it's not
hokey,
really religious anyway.
no,
right?
like cosplay
Right,
nonsense.
Fluffy.
Sometimes they're right, Levi.
If I want to talk
Sometimes
to,
those people
sometimes
are
they're
right.
right. But if I want to talk to somebody about like philosophy of religion, or I want to talk about something in a deeper level, the idea that you're
He
going to do
calls
that
me.
and you're going to talk about magic, I mean, you're not even the door is shut. I mean, like, modern academia, whether we're talking about the sciences, philosophy, the door is
So
done.
you
We're done.
probably troubled a few people.
It's like they think it is the stupidest thing in the world.
Did you have people in your world get just super confused that you were doing
Yes,
this?
yes. I have
Couldn't
tons of people,
really wrap
even
their
in my
head
life
around.
now, who are like, "You're doing what? Like, you're a what?" Because it is. I don't think a lot of people in this world, we get so insular in it, and then we don't realize that, like, this sounds crazy to a lot of people. Like, to still be talking about
Did you hear a
astrology and
weird
tarot
noise?
cards and whatever is just like it's just mockable in the wider world. It just is, and I try to keep a good head on my shoulders, and I try to use those opportunities where I feel very sort of mocked, honestly, as like, well, you know what? Don't take yourself too seriously. It's all, it is what it is. I'm not going to take it too seriously. But yeah, I do encounter that a lot, actually, where people are like, it's like a suppressed laugh. You're a what now? Like, you're a what, honey? You're a level 32 warlock? And, in what made up bullshit are we talking about? Like, I don't think that a lot of people understand in this world how othering this is.
Can be, yeah.
In spaces where there's a lot more secular, academic,
That's why
power.
A lot of secret initiates, and a lot of people who are in like high-end worlds like that remain secret initiates.
Yeah, they do. They lie or they don't bring it up.
I would like to ask Levi. Oops, sorry, blessed be. A quick question that's just going to,
I was just going to say, did I mention the fact that I am sitting in Ohio and I work for a large corporation, so I can't even imagine what Levi was talking about at all.
Yeah. No, I know you get it.
Does anyone in your world know, Christine? Or do you don't discuss that in your
Actually, I'm a very public witch now. Have I told my existing boss right now? No, because he's a really super sweet man who does things like teaches Sunday school and everything else. And I know that he would not appreciate it, nor be able to understand why I would choose to do something like this.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Everything that Levi said resonated. It was like, oh, that's cute. I bet you play D&D too. Do you think that's real?
It's like sweet
So yeah, there's an awful lot of there's an awful lot of that. Oh, she thinks she's a witch. But you know what I do? I use that to reinforce the fact that yes, I do think I'm a witch. I know I'm a witch. I made the promises of a witch, and I do my very best to uphold those every single day. Blessed be.
Those are called oaths. Christine, are you done with your questions? Can we take calls, or do you have another
I
question?
just want to ask one side question.
Let her finish.
I think Ellie's got the floor. I can be as done with the questions as you like.
Yeah, it's 7:20, so we can.
Ellie doesn't really follow rules, so
I do too. I am a big.
she's like, I have a question.
No.
Ellie, you're not supposed to be asking the
I
question.
know, but it just came into my mind from Christine's
But we're
questions.
going to let you,
Blessed be.
because you have a big bottle of whiskey.
Did either of you ever have a sit down with your parents or a significant relative with saying, I'm a witch,
Yes.
or a lover or prospective partner, and you had to say, I just need to sit down and tell you what I am.
No, mine
Did
was
you guys
weirder.
do that?
Yes, it happened, but I can't exactly remember the opening. So my mom knew, and actually my mom bought the spiral dance for herself to try to figure me out, and then I had to explain to her that wasn't the best medium. But my father, there was some sort of weird window opening. So my father was Christian, but he had also been interested in the occult when he was younger. So he was a problematic person all the way around. But something happened, and I unfortunately, maybe my mom would remember, something happened that gave me a window opening. So I just sort of like showed him some of the books and told him that I was a witch. And he started reading the books and was interested, and then of course got weird and freaked out about it. But I don't say we didn't have a sit down talk about it. But yes, my mother drove me at the age of 17 to my first SBAT with adult witches. My mother dropped me off. In fact, my mother partially introduced me to my first teacher, because my mom was like very involved. She was a weird mom. Like, she dealt with, well, first of all, she had a weird child. So, like, sometimes my mom would go looking for mandrake root for me without any idea of what mandrake root was or why her 17-year-old son wanted it. But that's how she actually, my mom met my teacher simultaneously to me, because she went to her and was like, my son wants mandrake root. And Shawnee was probably concerned.
Yeah,
you know,
toxic.
So yes, and then we all sewed it together, and I'd met Shawnee separately from my mother, but she was very supportive. So I don't remember like a sit down, but me and my mom were very close. So she never had a problem with it. There was only one time she ever expressed a problem with it, and that was when she found a deer head mask in my closet. Because she opened my closet and this giant deer head with antlers like came falling out. She's like, "That's the devil." I was like, "Mom, when has the devil ever been a deer? Come on." You know, but that's the only time she ever got weird. She's always been very supportive. My father was just a crazy Christian.
I did never tell my grandparents. I did talk about it with my parents, but I never talked about it with my grandparents. I thought it was too offensive to them. And we did have a lot of religious discussions, but I didn't ever say I practice and study witchcraft. But most other people I did. Did you, Levi, have any like specific moments where you kind of came out and said to somebody, a family member?
They knew all along. My parents, I mean, they're both passed now, but my parents were not particularly religious at all. They didn't care. They thought it was cool. The temple, some of the temple furniture that I have in my temple, the candelabras, my mother bought as a Christmas gift. So like, you know, my parents were just not, they despised religious fundamentalism, like despised.
Because they grew up.
The problem I had with my family was when my family were non-practicing Protestants. And when I became a Catholic when I was younger, that was the problem.
Wow.
That was your rebellion.
Wow.
Yeah, and they thought it was so off-putting at the beginning. They just thought it was so off-putting and churchy, and like they just didn't really love religion, to be honest. They grew up in Appalachia where it was shoved down.
So you were like
constantly.
You were basically, your teenage rebellion was
becoming religious.
To be like a Gothic Catholic.
Yeah, kind of.
Just like, I must repent from
exactly.
my sin.
I need rosaries and beeswax candles.
That reminds me of that movie with Cher and what's her name, Fiona Ryder, when she's the daughter and she becomes Catholic and they're Jewish, and she's like, we're not Catholic, and she wants to be a nun and all that.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah.
She thinks she gets pregnant from Jesus. It's a
I'll
great
look it up.
movie,
I'll look it up.
Did you, Christine, have a
Cher's
sit down
like,
with your
"We're not
parents
Catholic,
or
we're
Mike
Jewish," yeah.
when you started dating and say, I'm a witch? Did you have one of those?
There's all kinds of
I
fun.
did have to
Mike
have a
stories.
conversation with Mike because obviously, I mean, you look up Muggle in the dictionary, you see my husband. He is the sweetest, nicest, most supportive man ever. However, the idea of the fact that his girlfriend at the time was a witch and didn't just believe she was a witch, but actually did things, you know, went and harvested herbs, went off and disappeared, came back smelling like smoke, you know, weird smoke. Wasn't sure exactly what was going on. I had to have long conversations. Now I have to tell you that it wasn't until he visited a witchcraft shop in New Orleans and I had left him alone to go buy something for a costume in Mardi Gras, did he realize that we practice skyclad.
Oh, wow.
I remember that. I remember. Was it my
That
book?
was only a couple of
Was
years
it
ago, so
my
think about
book?
how long I've been a priestess and how long I've been a high
Was it my
priestess.
book that did this?
Yeah, and I
Like, he
had
opened
this
it up and saw Ellie naked, and that was his realization.
And realistically, he didn't bat an eye. He was like, "So naked, huh?"
I remember Mike saying to me once, I don't remember what we were talking about when Mike says to me, I don't know what you all actually worship, but my wife has a painting upstairs and she doesn't age. Or she has a painting in the attic.
Love
and
that.
she doesn't age. I don't know what you all worship. I don't know what you all actually worship, but
He does ask me, he's like, "Is this the holiday where you worship goats and eat babies, or is it the other way around?" I can't keep him straight.
Oh, I love
So, yeah.
playing with all that. That's fun.
he's like, I don't know if my wife worships.
He's very
the
tongue in
goddess
cheek
or
and he's very
devil.
sweet, but he knows how very serious and how very dedicated to the craft we are.
Yeah.
Yes, that's great.
Though he has a
Recipe.
serious issue with male belly dancers.
He's come around to that. He has.
So, as Brian said earlier, this is a call-in show, and it is that time. Christine's going to join our panel so she can help answer questions. I can also go through the chat, so if you are somebody who does...
I feel like, Levi, it's
Does
your
not.
turn to say the sex.
I'm not going to do the voice.
Come on.
309 Goddess,
Can you do it
309
in an Appalachian
46
accent?
309 Goddess, 309 463 Call in now.
That's the closest you've ever been to
I know,
doing it.
I know,
Is that
I know.
real? Is that what it sounds
That's
like?
what my parents used to sound like.
Oh.
Yeah,
He's never done this before for me.
I
This is
know.
like-
That's what my family sounds like. They have a very
So when you
very
were a little kid, is
traditional-
that how you sounded?
No, because we moved a lot. You learn your language from your peers more than your parents. So yes, I can look through comments, YouTube, Facebook.
So
We can answer
309
them.
Goddess. Call in. We want to know the phone's working. Ask us your questions. And Christine is joining the panel. You can ask any question. It doesn't have to be on the subject matter. It could be any question about witchcraft or the occult. So meanwhile, Ellie has a question for us.
What's your question, Ellie?
I asked it already.
Make one up.
Okay.
Put her on the spot. Be an oracle.
When was the first time in your life that the goddess came to you so strongly that you said, "All right, this is real. This is a goddess in front of me"? What was your age?
God.
And I know you both know that and Christine knows this too, there's a profound energy occurrence that is undeniable when you are in her presence that changes your worldview. It's incredibly powerful and emotionally strong. And I think we all know the experience. When did it happen first? And Christine can answer also.
Why don't we let Christine go 1st? Yeah.
I was going to say, show up as some kind of entity, much like what you said, Ellie, but it was a little bit older. It was somewhere in my teens. Profound goddess experience. Probably, no, I don't even have to think about it. 28. I was 28, and literally I was standing at the Atlantic Ocean under a full moon, and I was not having a good day at all. And it just all came down to me in absolute waves, and all of a sudden my problems seemed to be so small, and I just felt so different. And I knew in that moment what I was reaching out to was reaching out to me.
I do think they come to us. I think they watch us below and they love us and they want to help us. The special of us. Special.
By the way, my husband just chatted. It's the name of the movie is The Mermaids.
Yes.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah, that's great.
I love that answer, Christine. That's very beautiful.
Me and Patrick have a lot in common.
I think
Shoes, TV shows.
good movies, good TV shows. Yeah, you do. I think for me, the goddess. I
like to tease Levi that I'm going to steal his husband.
and
He's really
He's like,
cute.
take him. Take
that's
him.
not true.
He is good.
He is adorable. Beautiful.
I'm
man.
teasing.
I think when the goddess showed up for me, I remember one time Brian was conducting an interview of Val Hughes, who was an important teacher in this, who I loved very, very much, and Brian loved, I'm sure, even more. And he said, "Who's your favorite goddess?" And she said, "My mother." Right. I think that I saw the goddess in my own mother. Was my first experience of the goddess. I think my first experience of the goddess were my female friends in college who didn't treat me like garbage because I was gay. You know, I think that the goddess appeared to me as the feminist professors who broke me away from Catholicism and freed my mind. I think the goddess was every woman in my life, you know, who was crucial to my growth. But I think I went through a phase of being very, very religious as a child, and then very, very angry at that and very anti-religious. And then when I finally realized, just on a philosophical ground, I'm a theist. Like, I think, physicalism makes no sense to me. I think it's a bad philosophy. I'm a theist. I believe consciousness is not material, et cetera, et cetera. Then, of course, I had like rational reasons for the gods, and the god came through as a woman because women were important in my life. But when you ask me, when did I feel the full experience of the goddess? My first degree initiation.
Wow.
Because there she was,
Yeah.
no longer as an idea, not as a pagan goddess, not as a feminist theory, but as a fully experienced goddess in ecstasy, right? In religious ecstasy.
And she wasn't just an aesthetic, was she?
Correct. And she was not anything other than a fullness of being, and so I felt it in a beautiful way. But yeah, I think she's always been with me.
That's a really hard question to answer because, my first answer would be, well, really stealing Levi's answer that I think it was my mother, but I didn't think of her as a goddess at that time. But I think that really helped establish psychologically why I gravitated to the idea of a goddess. My late teens, early 20s were probably my first ritual experience with the goddess. I cannot pinpoint an exact moment because there were so many. But the most profound have been since I've been Alexandrian, because I think that there are things we do in our rituals that work better than what other people experience or have the capacity to work better. So I would say it's been within initiatory craft that I've had the most profound experiences with her. But it depends on what we're talking about. By, where I felt like she's standing in a room with me has been within my late teens, early 20s. When I knew she was in the room with me was Alexandrian craft.
Yeah.
Because I think we have methods that, if conducted properly, work better than other things. But she's been there, her presence, what does that mean exactly? Profound, I'd have to say Alexandrian craft day. When have I wept because of her? That's been in an Alexandrian ritual. Or maybe when I was pining over her as a teenager and I don't remember. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it also goes back to like, this maybe.
Because it was Mary too.
Oh, yeah,
And I wasn't Catholic. I was like Levi. I had a fantasy about being Catholic. But
I became one for a while.
The Native American people across the Lazards, they were Catholic, so they had Mary statues. I just was so jealous,
Protestantism is so bland and male.
Right.
Yes.
Like sometimes you're just like, oh my God.
I was like, they get all these cool statues, and I didn't understand any of it. I just thought it was cool,
But I think I go back to that. There's a thing in Plato about like, inductive reasoning leads you to certain truths, and then ecstasy leads you to truths just as well. And so I think like I always had that sort of rationalism about theism. But yeah, definitely circles. I agree with Brian. Circles, they're just different. They're designed to be so.
Right.
Right. That's like the whole point. I have a question for you all. I'm looking through the chat too. If you have questions, please feel free. If you're not
brave enough to call in and let us listen to your voice, then you can put it in the chat. And Levi will tell us because he's the only one that can see it.
And also Brian usually is like, if you're too much of a coward to dial the phone.
Because I like it when they call in. It's more exciting.
I know. But I have a question for all of you, and we can start with Christine since she's joining our panel and is our lovely guest. Do you feel like, even regardless, I don't want this to be a debate about like hard polytheism, soft polytheism. Brian's already been very clear about what craft
We're not
theology
against
is.
hard polytheism. The peasants need somewhere to go.
See, I knew he would be mean about it. But
what's mean about that?
Beyond just that debate, do you ever feel like your perception of the god and goddess of craft changes based on where you're at in your own life?
I would say it changes based on where I am in my own life and also where we are in the wheel of the year. Because how I perceive the god and goddess and everything that's going around me tend to tie together. I mean, I'm very fortunate right now that I have a place where I see 4 seasons. So when I'm seeing everything cold and everything dead around me, it's going to cause me to see my god and my goddess in a very different light, and who's sleeping and who's awake and who's doing what, versus when I see things in full bloom, or I see, people frolicking because it's springtime or spring break or whatever. I love that I had that opportunity to do that, but I think that also you're right. I think that one of the things that I've heard before is so often we reach out to the gods only when we need them and not when we have so many things to share. I think that's what's different in witchcraft versus what we see, what I've seen in secular life, or what I've even seen in, prior religions that I participated in, is I'm not praying to my God and goddess to ask them specifically for things. Sometimes it's just thank you for being, thank you for flowers, thank you for the warmth on my face, thank you for the lesson that I didn't think I needed to learn that was really painful, but I got through the other side. I think that there's an awful lot that we internalize about the god and goddess, but I also think that there's an awful lot that we should send back out, and not just when we're in our hour of need, but all the time, because it is a two-way flow of energy. It is that reverence and that worship and that thankfulness, even when there's nothing going on in your life, that makes those other moments so much more powerful.
Do you know, we all look so serious sometimes.
I think it's because we're looking here into the
thinking.
camera.
We're thinking.
So it looks downcast. I see that
We just
too.
look very judgmental.
I know, we all just
Do
look
I
like,
look really serious?
So I've noticed that
it's the angle.
we're all like resting bitch face with every conversation.
It's very, very
Oh, my
intense.
RBF game is strong. I'm not going to kid you.
I
Yeah, we
know.
all have it.
But Brian, do you see that do you feel like your relationships to God or goddess can change based on where you're at in your life?
Sure. I mean, I don't know that sure. I think that's natural because your needs are going to change, your feelings are changing. I don't know that I put a lot of thought into it, but yeah,
Just
sure.
take it as it comes, yeah.
And kind of like with Ellie, it's like, do they choose? Are you called? Did you choose them? I don't know. Some
Both.
things are just sort of like, I don't know that it matters. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know if it matters.
Well, not at
It's-
this point, right?
Here we are.
We're in, right?
We're
all
so
in.
far down the rabbit hole at this point.
I was like, I don't know if it was their idea or mine at this point. But
here we are.
But yes, because it's like, that's like saying, did your marriage change? Based on where you are. Everything, your interpersonal relationships, because it's you changing.
Yeah.
So if you're constantly changing, which I hope you are, all of us, then of course your perspectives and your thoughts and your feelings and all that sort of thing is. I vacillate from, let's say, seeing the goddess as beautiful and loving and butterflies and rabbits, and sometimes she's the queen of hell.
Fair.
She's all these things, not one of them, and it just depends on, it could be all kinds of reasons why I am tapping into something different.
Absolutely.
I will say in a witchcraft coven, there's a miracle that happens that we all seem to find it at the same time. Like when it's a certain way, it's the certain way for everyone, and everyone knows it.
Yeah.
It's like, I've never been in an initiatory circle where someone was like, she's rainbows and light, and somebody was like, she's infernal. Like, it's like we all know what she is in that moment.
Or the collectivity happens.
It does.
I think I
Yeah.
see that a lot
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
What about you, Ellie? Would you add anything to that?
I really agree with Christine. I see the gods in nature throughout the 12 months. And I go out and I say, oh, look at that plant blooming. Oh my gosh, look how beautiful that flower is opening up. And I feel that's kind of an expression of the goddess. The god comes out in different kinds of manifestations in my garden. That's through the year.
I have a bone to pick with Christine.
A bone.
You do?
She brought some mint over once for us. And somehow some nightshade seemed to have gotten in. So now I've got nightshade all over my roses. And
He's got the American belladonna,
well,
the non-toxic
the
one.
gardeners.
It's a black nightshade.
It's toxic when the dog eats it and gets sick. But they keep.
Only when it's green.
Yeah, Tiki ate some and got sick.
Don't eat them when you're green. Ugh, ugh.
No, he just is. He's diabetic now. He eats everything.
But they are kind of a local. I mean, they're a common.
No, I got it.
people call
The gardeners
a
keep
weed.
ignoring it. I'm like, can you get rid of this thing? So the mint didn't survive, but the nightshade is doing really well.
We do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
And I thought we can start with Christine again, respecting our guest. The question, Christine, is have any of you ever questioned becoming an Alexandrian?
Ooh.
No,
Brian knows this story probably better than anybody.
I haven't questioned it.
No.
I think in the
Yeah.
very beginning I questioned what was happening.
Sure.
No, I never questioned it.
What about you, Christine?
yeah, like I said, Brian probably knows this story really well, but when I first considered being an Alexandrian, as I've shared, I've been invited to outer courts of other groups, and I've studied for years, off and on, with different folks and read books, and not nearly to the extent of Brian and Levi. And when I got a chance to meet with Brian and talk with Brian, I knew my background, and I knew his esteemed background.
Actually, if you want to recall the first time we met, you didn't get to hear me talk at all.
I do believe that I did say something about that. I said something like, he doesn't let you talk very much, does he? Now, since then, that's been rectified, which I think is wonderful. In the meantime, I felt like I didn't have anything but, the learning that I had, which most of it Brian already had, and then, of course, my folk magic background, and, of course, my passion and reverence for what was being offered. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I sat on it, and I overanalyzed it like any good Virgo would do. And finally, I asked Brian if he would initiate me. And I went through the exact same angst when it came to my second and third. Actually, it was a whole lot worse. Because you're making promises as high priesthood that are irrevocable. And so, of course,
we're
the
sort of
overanalysis
like permanently stuck together now.
Exactly. So I really, really stressed about this. Yeah. But I've always had a thing in my life that the crows go absolutely batshit crazy. Oh, I'm allowed to say that? Okay, I did anyway.
I have a feeling I've said things on this show that are much worse.
Yes, you
have. Okay.
And they did. They did it the first initiation, and they did it this next initiation. So finally, I couldn't take it anymore. It was basically the message from the goddess going, seriously, are you going to get out of your own way? And I asked Brian once again, and it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.
Ellie, what would you add?
What have we thought about it since we become Alexandrian?
No, the question was, have you ever questioned becoming an Alexandrian?
Well, I'm going to have to say yes. I question it all the time, every day. I also question...
You still question
I do.
it?
No.
She's like, what have I done to my life?
It's not that kind of a question. It's the critical thinking question.
Yeah, you're being critical.
I'm just a philosopher at heart. So I'm looking, I'm reading, I'm thinking about it. I'm reviewing my experiences as an Alexandrian. But I've studied a lot of other different things, and I won't say I have problems with loyalty, but the universe is vast. Alexandrian witchcraft is a wonderful, I've said this so many times, wonderful, authentic, I think it's hermetically correct path in the Western mystery tradition. It's one of them. It's not the only one, and I'm interested in many things, and I don't question my initiation and focus on Alexandrian witchcraft, but I'm constantly reviewing it and all kinds of other religious subject matter in my mind every day. Sometimes I'd like a break from that, but I don't seem to get one.
Nor do we.
I don't regret it. I certainly don't regret it. I take it very seriously, and I.
Yeah, the way you can interpret this question could sound like that, and when I'm thinking about the question, it's like when I decided to re-seek initiation was because I wanted to actually be a formal part of the line of succession instead of just plugged into this thing arbitrarily from an ad hoc coven.
Right.
And of course, it was been very natural to be like, well, Gardnerian's the oldest thing, And it was actually one of the reasons why in Initiation of Witchcraft I did the sections about the different lines, because what most people don't know is that American Gardnerian witchcraft is newer than Alexandrian witchcraft, because Alexandrian witchcraft is a line of the book, and when Bucky was just getting over to the United States as an initiate, Alex and Maxine were already setting up shop in London. So they aren't the new kids on the block. They're just more divergent. Well, seemingly, but if you know about the lines, actually the American Gardnerians are more divergent. The changes they've made are vaster than the ones Alex implemented, in my opinion. Because me and Levi were discussing this recently, and I can't actually name everything that it is. Some things we've been very public about. But Alex never changed anything that was contrary to the Book of Shadows. Like, if you know about our changes and you have the Book of Shadows, you'll see that nothing in the book, he doesn't contrary anything in the Book of Shadows, including, well, I can't say everything, can I?
Yeah, no.
But, we know certain things, right? what the American Gardnerians did, I'd say some of it is contrary to the Book of Shadows. Not very much, but some of it. And obviously I can't say what that is either. And I don't know why I'm on this.
Yeah, the question was, have you ever questioned being an Alexandrian?
Oh, yeah, so here's the whole point. So, yes, I went down a rabbit hole. I originally wanted to be Gardnerian because that seemed to me like it was the older thing. And so it was a path of discovery for me to realize that that wasn't true. And when you ask about things choosing you, I don't think the Alexandrian gods are different than the Gardnerian gods. Actually, I know they are the same gods. So it wasn't about that. But I certainly think the gods, the goddess, fate, whatever we want to call it, certainly intended me to be Alexandrian. And I think it was a care given to me because I think they would have ridiculed me a long time ago.
Yeah, because they could excommunicate people. They'd have churched you quick.
And it would have just been because of who I'm married to. But, it is what it is. So their loss, I prefer being Alexandrian. I think we are as Christian once said, the cool kids that ran away from home, which really fits our personalities.
But also thinking for ourselves.
We're a bit more rebel. We're less secretive. We're still secretive. We're less secretive, and we're rebels. Look at Levi's tattoos.
I think. Have I ever questioned being Alexandrian?
You shouldn't even crack a smile with the tattoo thing.
Sure. I think it's bigger than that for me, though. I'm going to be really frank. I am not in this religion because I think it is some sort of special revelation, right? The way, I just don't understand that as a concept. I am in this religion.
I think it is in the goddess sense.
Sure.
But that's...
Sure, absolutely. But I'm in this religion because it connects me to the God, to the divine. End of story. So, if that...
Couldn't you go back to Judaism for that?
Sure, but that's my whole point is when I've questioned being an Alexandrian, it has not been being an Alexandrian. It has been the contemporary occult revival as a valid way to connect to the divine, right? That's what I've questioned. If I were ever to, this is never going to happen. I'm as loyal as the day is long. But if I were ever to leave the craft, it would not be to go become a Gardnerian or to go become a Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. I'd go become a Christian or something. It would be to radically
We already have their information.
It would be to radically depart from the occult, right? That's what I would depart from, not the craft. I actually, as I get older, it's so funny. When I first came into craft, I was deeply, deeply involved in studying all this Hermetic and early occult revival stuff and theosophy and everything. And as I get older, I actually like craft better. I told Brian the joke, that joke I tell people now, it's when they get too occulty for me, and because a lot of people in the occult world will explain shit to you as if it's genius and you've never heard about it. It's almost like mansplaining, where they're just well, if you really look at the Greek magical papyri, man, and so I just do this thing now. I've read those so many times. I've studied classical Greek. I don't need to have this conversation with you. I just go, oh, honey, I'm a Wiccan. I don't know about any of that. I'm a Wiccan, as a joke, because I hate all that. It's all that snobbery and foolishness. But do I ever doubt my experiences in craft? No, I don't. That would never go away. It can't.
Ellie, so you are just bedazzled by the idiocy around you. Ellie's not sure if humanity's worthy for her. I'm jaded against the Gardnerians.
Yes, we all have our different...
I'm actually not jaded against Gardnerians.
We all have our different crosses to bear.
Christine just has to think about things too.
No, you know what you should have said? You missed a great opportunity there. You could have been because she talked about how it was a struggle for her. You should have been Ellie thinks she's better than everybody. Levi's worried about looking like an idiot. I hate the Gardnerians, and Christine, well, she's in Ohio. She's in Ohio.
With my pros. There you go.
I don't hate Gardnerians.
Of course we don't.
I love Gardnerians.
No.
I think that we're the same priesthood. We're just different.
I think we ribbed them for fun. The way that
Well, some of them do hate me. That's for sure.
Sure, a lot of people do.
No, they don't. Just them.
Did Christine answer this? I would like to hear. Did you answer, Christine?
Yes, Christine was the first.
Okay.
Christine went first.
I don't think hating me because you hate my husband classifies as hating me.
No, it's tangential.
That's cheating by proxy. That's fair.
It's a complicated mathematical.
If you can't give someone a reason why you dislike me.
Now, don't you sell yourself short, honey. A lot of people hate you for who you are.
Well, I know. There are those people.
let's add one comment here.
Those would be the peasants, the park pagans, and some gardenarians.
Or
and maybe ugly people. Anyway, back to you.
I want to add in that studying a form of the occult or studying a religion is very different from being initiated magically by trained priesthood in a sacred space. There is no substitute for the event of initiation. It happens to you in the four worlds, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and it's really life-altering. And I will say about that...
What about astrally, ethically, and diabolically?
All that. But if you haven't gone through a real religious initiation in any of the traditions, and you're just reading about a thing, it's two different worlds.
Agreed.
And you
I'm
can't
disappointed no one has called in. I think we're at our last 10 minutes.
We are.
So we've got room for one more question if we're all brief.
Nobody's typed in a question.
I don't know. I can't see them.
Oh, no, we have. That's some of the questions I've been pulling have been reworded from the chat. So, like, that's where they're coming from.
Do you have one?
Oh, to end on?
Yeah. You have to be brief, though. We only have 5 minutes to answer.
Very brief.
I want to plug Christine.
A question we can all answer very briefly. What are your recommendations for somebody who, make them simple, who wants to seek the old gods or the gods of witchcraft? Since that was Christine's topic. Ellie?
Study your mythology, read your history, become immersed in their art and their representations, the gods, and become friends with them. They love it more than anything when you know their vocabulary, their vernacular, and you bring offerings to them of things they really love, and that shows up because you've studied them. I think that's a wonderful starting place.
Christine?
Exactly what Allie said, and also ask yourself why you're seeking this. You wouldn't go on a date without understanding why you were seeking a connection with a person. You shouldn't treat a god or goddess any less. As a matter of fact, it's a lot more than. Really spend a lot of time investing yourself and bringing yourself to the table so they understand what value you offer as a seeker.
Wow.
Brian?
That's a big...
I think you should find Jesus.
Jeebus.
I think
Jesus.
that whatever your quest is, I think you should have a sincere heart, you know. And I can't quite speak because I know some people go into witchcraft with no conception of who our gods are. Mm-hmm. The information is out there. You know, you can read all the books by the elders. You can read
Brian's book,
my books. You know, you can read what I always say is anything written before the 80s. Mm-hmm. Is probably going to have pretty common dialogue. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for those gods, if you're looking for the gods I was talking about earlier, the gods of witchcraft, British witchcraft, you know, if you're looking for those gods and the witchcraft revival, the gods of the witchcraft revival, the gods that were worshipped by Gerald Gardner, Alex Sanders, Sybil Leek, Robert Cochrane, Charles Cardell, and us, you know, if you're looking for those gods, then I think they're accessible to you now. You know, maybe not as accessible as they are to an initiate, but they are accessible because they exist. I think they brought initiation and the priesthood back into the world because there's a symbiotic co-creation going on. Yeah. You know, they, you know, to quote Dorian Valiente, you know, if you knock on a door, don't be surprised if someone answers, because these things come into the world through us, you know, and so they will work themselves out in your own life. You know, the goddess works through priesthood quite often. You know, we are her servants, her willing servants, you know, and so she will make herself known in the world through us, even our idiocy, you know. But I think if you're sincere and you really want to serve them, I can only speak from my own personal experience, the craft will use anyone to survive. And I feel like that fate has guided my life a lot, but it was still my choice, and it was my sincerity that made me a worthy choice, I think. Mm-hmm. So do they choose us or do we choose them? I don't know.
Both.
Yeah, I don't know. But I know
Two-way
that
street.
Here I am, and that's a miracle all on its own, you know. So
we're glad you're here, Brian.
Absolutely. The only thing I would add is my own answer is open yourself up to new experiences of religion.
Strange experiences.
Yes. Religion is weird.
Yes.
And it just is. And religious practice is odd sometimes. And opening yourself up to aspects of ecstasy, aspects of ways that the gods can come through in ways that you never would have thought if you were raised Christian or secular. The idea that poetry is theology, that dance is worship. These are part and parcel of many ways that the mystery cults and ancient pagan religion worked. This was in the mind of many of the witchcraft elders. That's why our liturgy is designed the way it is. So open yourself up, I would say, to experiencing the gods in art, in flesh, in the body, in movement, and in alcohol, and in dance, and open yourself up to that.
Unbridled carnal sex.
Intense.
Sometimes with a Mexican.
It's just like so intense.
Wow.
Or a UPS man.
I know that's right. Him and his roommate.
Do you want to give the last to Christine for her to give her?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I want to plug her at the end, but let's her answer and then I'll plug her.
Oh, no, she went.
Oh, okay. So we'll plug her now.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on. Christine is the second time she's been a guest on here, and she's been on, I think she's been on Covendom before as like a guest in a weird way, but before we had guests. I think she was a guest before we had guests once, but I don't remember. But
once upon a time, I sat on that side of the podium. Yeah.
Yes. So, because once in a while we had guests, even though that wasn't a guest show. So thank you for coming on once again. So Christine Stevens lives in Ohio. And if you're interested in Alexandrian witchcraft and she is in your geography, Christine, are people welcome to connect to you? And if so, how would you like them to do it?
Absolutely, they can. I am a public witch, so I don't have special pages or anything. You can find me, this face, on Facebook as Christine Stevens, or of course you can connect with me on my email. That is nolawitch, NOLAWYTCH, @gmail.com. I'm in New Orleans often enough that I'm not giving that one up.
And Christine was my first high priestess in the New Orleans coven, initiated by me. Well, at least your second, third. I don't remember if I did your first. I think I did do you first. Did I do you first?
Who else could have done my first?
Yeah, so I initiated all her degrees. I don't know. I've become kind of a grandpa in the craft. I can't remember anymore. I'm like, what? So I personally vouch for her. Christine also does special appearances in at Hexfest every year annually, and she will continue to be, I'm quite sure, will continue to be a speaker at Hexfest and at WitchCon.
Absolutely.
And even though we are sort of steering away from, we're trying to make Hexfest more about locals, Christine was the high priest of the New Orleans Coven, and she can afford her own plane ticket.
And I'm there every 2 to 3 months anyway.
Yes. So.
And remember, we will not see you for a couple of weeks. We will come back in December, and that will be when we return. It has been lovely.
And our next ambush interview to be announced.
Ooh, yay.
Absolutely. I'm excited. Good
Happy
night.
Thank you all for
Happy
listening.
Equinox.
Happy Equinox.
And happy Halloween.